Hundreds of Ukrainian protesters have blocked rail lines that carry coal from the resource-rich east to the west.
I would like to underline they are not blocking separate areas of Donetsk and Luhansk regions, and they're not creating problems for them. They are blocking Ukraine. They are blocking our fight for restoration of the territorial integrity.
They say the trade is stained with the blood of 10,000 people killed over 3 years of fighting between pro-Russian separatists and the Ukrainian army.
It's terrifying to realize, but this trade gives resources to occupation administrations in Donetsk and Luhansk, which are under control of the Russian President Vladimir Putin. It gives them an opportunity to hire more people for their so-called army squads and attack our land.
The blockade, now 6 weeks and counting, is backed by a coalition which includes nationalist militias and opposition politicians. Protesters are also demanding the release of dozens of Ukrainian soldiers who they say have been taken hostage by separatist rebels.
Ukrainian government has no clear approach of how to retrieve them. Maybe it's a guarantee for separatists to get amnesty at some point, or they are keeping our soldiers as leverage on Ukrainian establishment.
Without cheap eastern coal to power its huge steel industry, Ukraine now faces an energy crisis. Kiev has warned that if the blockade stops the trade for good, it could cost its economy up to $3.5 billion and 75,000 jobs. 7 out of Ukraine's 15 thermoelectric power stations can only burn anthracite coal, which is exclusively mined in the east. Leaders of the separatist republics had set a deadline for the blockade to be lifted by March 1st. That's come and gone. They've now started to take control of Ukrainian registered businesses, including a major telecom, which services 200,000 people in the eastern city of Donetsk.
The leadership of the proclaimed Donetsk and Luhansk republics hardly had another option to ensure functioning of their enterprises. All this is a result of a situation where the Ukrainian government cannot ensure normal functioning of these enterprises because of the actions of radicals.
Russian President Vladimir Putin announced last month that Moscow would recognize all documents issued in Ukraine's rebel republics, which could facilitate trade. The railway blockade has forced to the surface an issue at the heart of the conflict. Is Ukraine beyond the point of political and economic reintegration? Randolph Nogel, The Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss what's at stake in Ukraine, I'm joined now by Viktor Levitsky in Kiev. He is a former Ukrainian deputy minister under President Viktor Yanukovych and now leads the Ukrainian Institute of Strategies of Global Development and Adaptation. And also from Kiev, Yegor Sobolyev. He is the chairman of the Parliamentary Committee of Corruption Prevention. Thanks both so much for joining us. Let me just establish where you both stand on this issue. Viktor, I'll start with you. Have the activists blocking these railways picked the right battle? Are they fighting for the right cause here?
I think this blockade it's a way to self-damage. And in the same time, by the way, of course, I cannot support this blockade, but in the same time, we cannot say that this blockade do nothing. This blockade is a very important and significant moment for our modern history, and I should tell you that after this, even if we unblock the blockade, we should find a lot of answers for a lot of questions, and especially trading with uncontrolled territory. But as for me, this point of view, this question, much more complicated than just to have trading with uncontrolled territory or doesn't. Why? Because the cornerstone of this question is, and the blockade, it's just top of the iceberg. The cornerstone of this question is Do we want to have Donbass inside Ukraine, or we don't? Do we want to have a unified country, complete country, or we don't?
Yegor, are you behind this blockade?
Yes.
Why?
Three reasons. First, this trade in blood, as we call it, in fact, adds resources to our enemy. Putin is attacking Ukraine. His occupied administrations in Donetsk and Lugansk are attacking Ukraine. Every day we lose people, we have blood, and in the same time we have great trade with aggressor. This is not about moral. This is also about our ability to defend our independence. I often say here in Ukraine that the best Putin's agent is corruption, unfortunately. And what I see, we have a great corrupt scheme on this blockade. This war has established a big difference in prices. So this trade is very, very profitable now for both sides. Ukrainians pay our electricity bills for coal from Rotterdam in Holland, Netherlands. But in fact, the coal was imported from Donetsk and Lugansk. And of course, difference in prices makes very, very profitable such operations. And that raises a very important question. If trade is so profitable, and if leaders of Ukraine, some chiefs of secret service, military service, and occupied administrations of Putin on occupied territories have so big money from this trade, what is the chance to finish this war? Does not this trade make this war very profitable for some of our authorities and authorities in Donetsk and Lugansk?
Okay.
That's why we are proposing in the parliament the law that will ban this trade.
Okay. Victor, do you agree that corrupt separatists are the only one benefiting from this trade?
I disagree with this formulation of this question. Because, first of all, now we started to talk about economical sphere, economical issues. But I think the main idea of the blockade is political issues, and it's political problem. And believe me, if we solve this problem, we will have another problem in another place, as we saw it with blockade in Crimea. Up to now, we don't even know it exists now or doesn't. It's first of all. Secondly, what I want to say, and this is a question about the blockade. It's really deep question, because it's a question about reintegration, Donetsk and Lugansk, Donbass in general, inside in Ukraine. And now, when a colleague tried to explain corruption issues, corruption's reason of this blockade, economical reason of this blockade, probably all of this is true, are true. But I want to ask, can we live without this coal? But next step, we should understand, if we refuse from Donbass coal, we should buy it or in Russian Federation, for example, which is, as Igor told, aggressor and sponsoring this country, or in South Africa. But of course, in Russian Federation, in South Africa, we can buy this product with higher price. It's first of all. But secondly, Donbass, Donetsk and Lugansk, official, it's Ukrainian territory. And let's think about how to integrate this territory inside in Ukraine, but now how to push it from Ukraine to another space.
Okay. Yegor Sobolyev, we only have a minute left. How do you think this is best resolved going forward?
Vote for our draft law. In fact, in this draft law, we are proposing not only to ban this trade on blood, but also to confirm, legally confirm, that our territories were occupied by Putin, and we should put on Russia all responsibility for economic damage and violations of human rights on these territories. In the same time, we are proposing to sell to our occupied citizens food and goods that they need for ordinary life.
Okay. Viktor Levitsky, Yegor Sobolyev, thank you so much for joining us from Kiev on the Newsmakers.